WWJD. What would Jesus do? I've heard this saying since I was very little. Sunday school teachers teaching about sharing and that taking the toy from the kid next to me is not something Jesus would do. Now, I can understand the heart and intention behind this particular saying, but on closer inspection, this saying may not fulfill the intentions of those using it. Let's take a look. So we ask, is this biblical? And for my video last week, there are two follow-up questions. And the first question starts with us looking at the Bible itself and looking and seeing if there are any verses that would match this phrase. For this particular phrase, there are two things I wish to look at. First thing being that there are a few verses that on their own can look like this Christian phrase. 1 Peter 2 verses 21 says, "To this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps." And 1 John 2 verse 6 says, "Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did." And on their own, they may be taken to support WWJD. But when looking at the first question that analyzes a Christian phrase, you can't just look for similar wording and similarities in ideas. You have to look at the context of these verses. And the context of these verses talk about being Christ-like, not being Christ. This is where I think this phrase gets misused the most. And this leads into the second question of, is it biblical? The second question is, if it's biblically true. And to know that, we have to look at the meaning of the phrase itself. The meaning behind this Christian saying is, when placed in any given situation, we look to the example of Jesus and ask what he would do. This in itself holds many problems that can cause more harm than any good. The first concern is in using this as a reflection of thinking what Jesus would do. Well, it isn't a step-by-step process and can lead to many interpretations. Jesus lived in a completely different time with different issues, and in most cases, a different culture altogether. Once we start down the path of asking what Jesus would do in a situation he never had to face, then we will find ourselves following our own interpretations and an incorrect view of who Jesus is. Another concern to note is, in asking what Jesus would do, we can miss the fact that we aren't Jesus. Jesus is the Son of God, Messiah, perfect, and not exactly something that anyone can put on their resume and be telling the truth. This branches off from the first concern of creating our own interpretations of Jesus, but taking it a step further. We start to not only have a distorted view of who Jesus is, but we start to become our own God, following our own conclusions that come from a faulty thinking. Our purpose and mission is not the same one that Jesus had. So we have to ask different questions and have a different attitude than he did. Now, in looking at this Christian phrase again, we could try changing it up to something like, what would Jesus say? But even that would hold the same concerns. We are not Jesus. We were not called to the same mission, and we are not perfect. We are, though, called to be Christ-like, to follow the most important commandments. Matthew 22 verses 37 to 40 says, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind." This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. This can be led out in our lives from the help of the Holy Spirit and through prayer, in asking, what does Christ want me to do? Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, please subscribe below, share with your friends, and if you have any other Christian phrases you want me to look at, comment below. This is Black Diamond Apologetics.